I've always been fascinated by the things we choose to forget. The way memory bends and warps like light through water, distorting the truth until it becomes something else entirely. Something safer, something we can live with. But what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried? When the things we've tried so hard to forget come clawing their way back to the surface? My name is Ellie Harper, and I'm here to tell you about Apollo 19. You won't find it in any history books. You won't hear about it in documentaries or see it mentioned in the grand tales of space exploration. NASA says it never happened. But I know the truth. I was there. And the weight of that knowledge has been crushing me for decades. It was 1972, and the world had already begun to lose interest in the moon. We'd planted our flag, we'd brought back our rocks, and the public was ready for the next big thing. But there was one last mission. One final journey to the lunar surface that would change everything. Looking back, I wonder if we were arrogant, thinking we could tame the cosmos, or were we just naive, blind to the vastness and indifference of the universe? I was young then, barely 28, but I'd already made a name for myself in mission control. They called me the numbers whisperer, said I could coax solutions out of the most stubborn equations. It was a gift that had earned me a spot on the Apollo 19 team, though I didn't know then what that really meant. In those days, I believed in the purity of science, in the noble pursuit of knowledge. How foolish I was. The mission was shrouded in secrecy from the start. We were told it was a routine geological survey, but the tension in the air told a different story. I remember the day Tom Mitchell, our flight director, pulled me aside. His eyes were dark, haunted by something he couldn't, or wouldn't put into words. "Ellie," he said, his voice low, "what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Understand?" I nodded, my heart racing. There was something in his tone, a gravity I'd never heard before, that made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a precipice. Apollo 19 isn't what they're telling you. We're not going for rocks. We're going for something else. Something big. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. In those days, you learned quickly that some questions were better left unasked. But oh, how I wish I had pushed harder, demanded answers. Maybe then we could have stopped it. Or maybe we were always destined to open that door, puppets dancing on cosmic strings. The launch was on a cool September morning. I remember the roar of the Saturn V, the way it shook the earth beneath our feet. In my earpiece, I could hear the calm voices of the crew. Commander Daniel Carter, Lunar Module Pilot Logan Hayes, and Command Module Pilot Kate Dawson. They were the best of the best, hand-picked for this mission. I wondered then if they knew what they were really flying into. Daniel was the stolid, dependable type. A career military man with a square jaw and eyes that had seen too much. Logan was younger, more exuberant. He'd once told me that space was in his blood, that he felt more at home among the stars than he ever did on Earth. And Kate was brilliant. A physicist who could run circles around most of her male colleagues. I'd always admired her, envied her confidence and drive. For 3 days, we tracked their progress across the void. Everything was normal, by the book. But as they approached lunar orbit, something changed. The tension in mission control ratcheted up, and Tom's face grew grim. "Prepare for orbital insertion," he said, his voice tight. And prepare for deviation. Deviation. The word hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't part of the plan, at least not the plan I knew. I felt a cold wave pass through me, a premonition of the horror to come. As Apollo 19 swung around the far side of the moon, we lost contact. Standard procedure. But when they should have reappeared, there was only silence. The quiet was oppressive, suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud in my ears, counting out the seconds of dread. Minutes ticked by, then hours. The room grew thick with fear and confusion. I watched as Tom made hushed phone calls, his face growing paler with each passing moment. The air in mission control felt electric, charged with a mixture of anticipation and terror. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a crackle of static burst through our speakers. It was Daniel, his voice strained and distant. "Houston, we've found it." "Found what?" I wanted to scream. But before anyone could respond, the transmission cut out again. The silence that followed was deafening, pregnant with possibilities too terrifying to contemplate. For the next 48 hours, we received only fragments, bits and pieces of conversations, strange sounds that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I remember one transmission clearly, Logan's voice filled with a mix of awe and terror. It's not possible. The readings, gravity is. Jesus Christ, what is this thing?" And then nothing. Apollo 19 vanished, swallowed by the dark side of the moon. In that moment, I felt something fundamental shift in the universe, as if some cosmic scale had tipped and we were all about to fall into an abyss we couldn't even begin to comprehend. We combed through every scrap of information, looking for any clue as to what had happened, but it was like they had simply ceased to exist. The moon had swallowed them whole, leaving no trace behind. I remember the night Tom came to me, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. He pressed a folder into my hands, his fingers trembling. "Destroy this," he whispered. "All of it. It never happened. Apollo 19 never existed." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the look in his eyes stopped me cold. This wasn't just about following orders. This was about survival. In that moment, I realized that whatever had happened up there, whatever our astronauts had found, it was something that could shake the foundations of our world. So I did as I was told. I erased logs, destroyed tapes, wiped computers clean. Apollo 19 became a ghost, a whisper, a story told in hushed tones by those few who knew the truth. But even as I went through the motions, a part of me rebelled. How could we just erase 3 lives? How could we pretend that Daniel, Logan, and Kate had never existed? The guilt ate at me, gnawing at my conscience in the dark hours of the night. I would wake up in cold sweats, hearing phantom transmissions, seeing their faces in the shadows. What had they encountered up there? What horror had been unleashed? But the truth has a way of lingering, doesn't it? Of seeping through the cracks we try so desperately to seal. It started small, an anomaly in a lunar photograph here, a strange reading from a satellite there. Things that could be explained away, brushed under the rug, but they kept coming, more and more frequently. I left NASA not long after, unable to bear the weight of the lie. I tried to move on, to forget. But the moon haunted my dreams, whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. In my darkest moments, I wondered if we had opened some kind of Pandora's box, if we had set something in motion that could never be undone. Years passed. The world changed. We sent robots to Mars, built stations in orbit, dreamed of colonies among the stars. But always, there was the moon. Watching, waiting. A silent sentinel holding secrets too terrible to comprehend. I threw myself into other pursuits, trying to drown out the whispers of the past. I got married, had children, watched them grow. But even in my happiest moments, there was always a shadow, a sense that I was living on borrowed time, that someday the truth would come for me. It was a cold night in November when the knock came at my door. My husband had passed away a few years prior, and my children were grown with families of their own. I was alone with my memories and my guilt. I opened the door to find a woman standing there, her face half hidden by shadow. She couldn't have been more than 30, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of old sorrows. "Ellie Harper?" she asked, her voice soft but intense. I nodded, wary. In that moment, I felt the weight of all my years, all my secrets. "My name is Samantha Brooks. I need to talk to you about Apollo 19. My blood ran cold. Those words, that mission, they were like a key unlocking a door I'd kept firmly shut for decades. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, moving to close the door, but even as I spoke, I knew it was futile. The past had finally caught up with me. Samantha was faster, wedging her foot in the gap. "Please," she said, her voice urgent. "I know you were there. I know what happened. And I think it's happening again." Against my better judgment, I let her in. As she stepped into the light, I saw that she was young, probably in her early 30s. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, but there was something else there too: fear. It was a look I recognized all too well. I'd seen it in the mirror every day since Apollo 19. "I work for NASA," she said, settling onto my couch. Her posture was tense, coiled like a spring. "In the lunar imaging department. For the past 6 months we've been seeing things. Objects that shouldn't be there. Structures that appear and disappear. And the gravity readings, they're all wrong." I felt the old familiar dread creeping up my spine. It was like being thrust back in time, back to those terrifying days in mission control. "What do you mean, wrong?" She pulled out a tablet, her fingers dancing across the screen. "Look at this," she said, turning it towards me. The image was grainy, a black and white photo of the lunar surface. But there, in the center, was something that made my heart stop. A perfect circle, darker than the surrounding regolith, with strange angular shapes protruding from its edges. It was alien, wrong in a way that defied description. That's impossible," I whispered, my mouth suddenly dry. Samantha nodded grimly. "That's what we thought, but it gets worse." She swiped to the next image. It was the same area, but the circle was gone. In its place was a crater deep and jagged, as if something had been violently ripped from the moon's surface. "This was taken 24 hours later," she said. "Whatever that thing was, it's gone now. And since it disappeared, we've been picking up anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Part of me wanted to shut the door, to go back to my life of willful ignorance. She hesitated, chewing her lip. "Gravitational disturbances. Small at first, barely noticeable. But they're getting stronger, and they're not just affecting the moon." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "Earth," I breathed, the word hanging heavy in the air between us. Samantha nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. "We've been trying to keep it quiet, but there have been incidents. Localized gravity fluctuations. Objects lifting off the ground for no reason. It's subtle for now, but it's escalating. Fast." I stood up, pacing the room as my mind raced. The old fear was back, clawing at my insides. "Why are you telling me this? What do you expect me to do?" "Because you were there," she said simply. "You know what they found, what they were looking for. We need to know, Ellie, before it's too late." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. "You think I know?" They never told us. We were kept in the dark, fed lies and half-truths. All I know is that whatever they found out there, it scared them enough to bury it all. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes intense. "But you must have seen something, heard something, anything that could help us understand what we're dealing with." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember those frantic, terrifying days. The fragments of transmissions, the fear in the astronauts' voices. And then, suddenly, a memory surfaced. Something I'd forgotten, or perhaps forced myself to forget. "There was a phrase," I said slowly, the words feeling strange and heavy on my tongue. "Something Logan said right before we lost contact for good. He said, 'The key turns and the door opens.'" Samantha's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" I shook my head. A shiver coursed through me. "I don't know. But whatever they found up there, whatever that object was, I think it was some kind of key. A key to what? I can't even begin to imagine." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. I found myself thinking about the nature of discovery, about humanity's relentless push into the unknown. We'd always thought of space as a frontier to be conquered, a new world to be tamed. But what if it was something else entirely? What if, in our arrogance, we'd stumbled into something we were never meant to understand? Finally, Samantha spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "We need to go back," she said. "We need to find out what's really up there." I stared at her, incredulous. "Go back? To the moon? Are you insane?" The very thought of it made my heart race. Memories of those lost transmissions echoing in my mind. She met my gaze steadily. "Do you have a better idea? Whatever's happening, it's only going to get worse. We need answers, Ellie, and they're up there." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was crazy. But deep down, I knew she was right. The moon had been calling to me for decades, its secrets burning a hole in my soul. Maybe it was time to answer. Maybe this was my chance to finally face the truth, to confront the horror that had haunted me for so long. "Even if I agreed," I said slowly, feeling the weight of each word, "how would we even begin to make this happen? NASA's not exactly handing out tickets to the moon." A small smile played at the corners of Samantha's mouth. "Let's just say I have connections, people who are just as concerned as we are, who are willing to do whatever it takes to get to the truth." And just like that, I was in. God help me, I was in. It felt like stepping off a cliff, like surrendering to a current I'd been fighting my whole life. But there was also a sense of relief. After decades of running, of hiding from the truth, I was finally going to face it head on. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of secret meetings, clandestine training sessions, and more lies than I care to remember. We assembled a small team, Samantha and me, a brilliant young engineer named Alex Chen, and a grizzled ex-military pilot called Jack Reeves. Alex was a prodigy, barely out of college, but with a mind that could unravel the most complex problems. He approached our mission with an enthusiasm that was both refreshing and terrifying. Jack, on the other hand, was all hard edges and dark humor. He'd seen too much, done too much, and seemed to view our impending journey to the moon as just another day at the office. As we prepared, I found myself wrestling with deep existential questions. What right did we have to uncover secrets that had been hidden for so long? Were we protectors of humanity, or were we meddling in things beyond our comprehension? The weight of our actions, the potential consequences, kept me awake at night. Our rocket was a cobbled-together monstrosity, built from stolen plans and black market parts. It was a death trap, held together by hope and duct tape. But it was our only shot. As I looked at it, gleaming in the pre-dawn light of our secret launch site, I couldn't help but think of the gulfs we were about to cross. Not just the physical distance to the moon, but the vast, yawning chasm between what we knew and what we were about to discover. Launch day came too soon. As we strapped ourselves in, I couldn't help but think of Daniel, Logan, and Kate. Had they felt this same mix of terror and exhilaration? Had they known they were flying to their doom? I closed my eyes, sending a silent apology to their memory. We were about to finish what they had started, for better or worse. The ascent was brutal, rattling my teeth and threatening to shake our ramshackle craft apart. The G-forces pressed me back into my seat, and for a moment I thought this was it. We would die here, torn apart by the very forces we were trying to escape. But somehow, miraculously, we made it. As Earth shrank behind us, I felt a wave of vertigo so intense I thought I might pass out. The blue marble of our home planet, surrounded by the vast emptiness of space, looked so fragile, so vulnerable. I wondered, not for the first time, if we were making a terrible mistake. "You okay back there, old-timer?" Jack's gruff voice came through my headset, pulling me from my reverie. I managed a weak laugh, trying to mask my unease. "Just peachy. Wake me when we get there." The journey to the moon seemed both endless and far too short. In the cramped confines of our makeshift spacecraft, we had little to do but think and talk. I found myself opening up to my companions, sharing stories of my time at NASA, of the night Apollo 19 disappeared. They listened with rapt attention, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. "Do you ever wonder," Alex said during one of our many conversations, "if we're meant to know everything? If there are some secrets the universe keeps for a reason?" His question hung in the air, heavy with implication. I thought about it for a long moment before responding. "I used to believe in the purity of knowledge," I said slowly. "That understanding was always better than ignorance. But after Apollo 19, I'm not so sure anymore. Maybe there are some doors that should stay closed." Samantha shook her head, her eyes blazing with determination. "We can't afford that kind of thinking. Whatever's happening, it's already affecting Earth. We need to understand it if we have any hope of stopping it." Jack, who had been silent until now, let out a bitter laugh. "Stop it. Kid, we'll be lucky if we survive this. Some things, once they're set in motion, can't be stopped." His words sent a chill through me, echoing my own deepest fears. But there was no turning back now. We were committed to this course, for better or worse. As we approached lunar orbit, I felt the old familiar tension creeping back in. This was it, the point of no return. I found myself holding my breath, half expecting to hear the ghostly voices of Apollo 19's crew crackling through our comm system. "Beginning orbital insertion," Jack announced, his voice tight with concentration. "Everybody hold on to your butts." As we swung around the far side of the moon, I closed my eyes, silently praying to a god I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. This was where we'd lost Apollo 19. Would history repeat itself? But we emerged on the other side unscathed, the pocked lunar surface spread out beneath us. For a moment I allowed myself to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Maybe we could find our answers and return home, leaving the horrors of the past behind us. Then Alex's voice cut through my thoughts, tight with alarm. Guys? We've got a problem." I leaned forward, peering at his console. The readings were impossible. Gravity was fluctuating wildly, spiking and dropping in a chaotic dance that defied all known laws of physics. "What the hell?" Samantha breathed, her face pale in the dim light of the cabin. Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared as we were yanked downward towards the lunar surface. It was as if some massive, invisible hand had reached out and grabbed us, pulling us inexorably towards the moon. "Mayday, mayday," Jack shouted, fighting with the controls. "We're going down." The next few minutes were a blur of terror and noise. I remember the sickening crunch as we hit the ground, the screech of tearing metal. And then, silence. A silence so profound it seemed to press against my eardrums, threatening to crush me. I came to slowly, my head throbbing. The cabin was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights. I could hear ragged breathing nearby, punctuated by the occasional groan of twisted metal. "Everyone okay?" I croaked, tasting blood in my mouth. A chorus of pained groans answered me. We were alive at least. But as I took in our surroundings, I realized we had bigger problems. The ship was a wreck, barely holding together. And through a jagged tear in the hull, I could see the stark lunar landscape stretching out before us. Desolate, alien, hungry. "Well," Jack said, his voice grim, "looks like we made it." We suited up in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we stepped out onto the lunar surface, I felt a wave of déjà vu so strong it nearly knocked me off my feet. This was wrong. We shouldn't be here. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to get as far away from this place as possible. But there was nowhere to run. We were trapped here on this dead world with whatever horrors awaited us. "Which way?" Alex asked, his voice small in the vast silence of the lunar landscape. Samantha consulted a device on her wrist, her movements jerky with tension. "The anomaly was last detected about 2 kilometers that way," she said, pointing towards a distant ridge. We set off, our movements awkward and bouncing in the low gravity. But something felt off. The pull was inconsistent, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker. It was like walking on a ship in stormy seas, never quite sure where your foot would land. As we trudged across the lunar surface, I found myself thinking about the nature of reality, how thin the veil was between what we thought we knew and the vast, unknowable truths of the universe. We had come here seeking answers, but what if those answers destroyed everything we thought we understood about the world? Do you ever wonder, I said, breaking the tense silence, if we're not alone in the universe, not just alien life, but something else, something beyond our comprehension? Samantha turned to look at me, her face barely visible behind her helmet's visor. What do you mean? I struggled to put my thoughts into words. I mean, what if there are things out there that operate on a completely different level of existence? Things that see us the way we see ants or bacteria? Alex shuddered visibly. That's a terrifying thought. But not an impossible one, Jack added, his voice gruff. The universe is a big place. Who's to say what's really out there? As we crested the ridge, our philosophical musings were cut short. There, spread out before us, was a sight that defied description. A vast, circular depression in the lunar surface, easily a kilometre across. And at its centre, a structure that hurt to look at. It was shifting, morphing. One moment it looked like a tower of gleaming metal. The next, a writhing mass of tentacles. It hurt to look at, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Colours that shouldn't exist swirled across its surface, and I could have sworn I heard whispers at the edge of my consciousness. "My God," Samantha whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "What is it?" But I knew. Somehow, deep in my bones, I knew. "It's a door," I said, the words feeling heavy and strange on my tongue. "A door to somewhere else." As if in response to my words, the structure pulsed. A wave of something rippled out from it, distorting the very fabric of space around us. I felt a tugging sensation as if every atom in my body was being pulled towards that impossible thing. "We need to get closer," Samantha said, taking a step forward. Her voice was strange, almost dreamy. "We need to understand." I grabbed her arm, panic rising in my chest. "Are you insane? We need to get the hell out of here." But it was too late. Another pulse emanated from the structure, stronger this time. I felt myself lifting off the ground, the moon's grip on me suddenly gone. We tumbled through the void, helpless as leaves in a storm. I saw Jack and Alex spinning away, their screams silent in the vacuum of space. Samantha reached for me, her eyes wide with terror behind her helmet's visor, and then, impossibly, I heard a voice. A voice I hadn't heard in decades, but one that had haunted my dreams every night since Apollo 19. The key turns, and the door opens. It was Logan, but not Logan as I'd known him. This voice was wrong, distorted, as if it was coming from very far away, or from something that was only pretending to be human. The structure was changing again, opening like some vast cosmic flower. I could see things moving within. Shapes that hurt my mind to look at, entities that existed in more dimensions than I could comprehend. In that moment, I understood the true horror of what we had discovered. This wasn't just a door to another place. It was a door to another reality, one that operated on laws so alien to our own that merely perceiving it threatened to shatter my sanity. "They're coming," the not Logan voice said, echoing in my mind. "They've been waiting so long, and now the door is open." I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare. But there was nowhere to go. We were caught in the gravity of something far greater and more terrible than we could comprehend. I thought of Earth, of all the people going about their lives, blissfully unaware of the cosmic horror that was about to be unleashed upon them. As the structure fully bloomed, revealing a void darker than the deepest reaches of space, I had one final, horrifying realization. We hadn't come here to find answers. We'd come here to finish what Apollo 19 had started, to turn the key, to open the door. And now, floating helplessly above the lunar surface, I watched as something began to emerge from that impossible darkness. Something vast and ancient and hungry, something that had been waiting for eons for this moment. The last thing I remember before the darkness took me was the sound of laughter. Not human laughter, but something colder. Something that had been waiting for eons for this moment. It was the laughter of the cosmos itself, amused by our pitiful attempts to understand its mysteries. As consciousness slipped away, I had one final terrible thought. We had come looking for the truth about Apollo 19. But in doing so, we had unleashed something far worse. We had brought the end of everything. The key had turned. The door was open. And what lay beyond was coming for us all. In my last moments of lucidity, I wondered if this was always how it was meant to be. If humanity's relentless push into the unknown was always destined to lead us here, to this moment of cosmic reckoning. We had reached for the stars, and in doing so, we had awakened something that should have remained sleeping. As the darkness enveloped me, I thought I heard a voice, not Logan's this time, but my own. A whisper from the past, a warning unheeded. Some doors should stay closed. But it was too late. The door was open and the universe would never be the same again.